There is a strange feeling in the air around you right now. Not the kind of feeling that appears loudly. Not the kind that demands your attention. This feeling is quiet. It lingers in the background. And yet, it refuses to leave. Because somewhere, someone cannot stop thinking about you. Someone cannot silence the memories. Someone cannot erase the connection. And whether you realize it or not, an emotional conversation is getting closer. Much closer than you think. Tonight, I want you to imagine something. Imagine a person sitting alone in a room. No distractions. No friends around. No noise. Just silence. And in that silence, your name appears in their mind. Not once. Not twice. Again. And again. And again. They try to focus on other things. But somehow every road leads back to you. Every memory leads back to you. Every emotion leads back to you. Because there are connections in life that time cannot break. There are bonds that distance cannot destroy. And there are people who discover your value only after you are no longer standing beside them. The shocking truth is that many people believe missing someone disappears with time. But sometimes the opposite happens. Sometimes time magnifies everything. The memories become stronger. The absence becomes louder. The regrets become heavier. And that is exactly what is happening now. This person thought they could move on. They thought they could bury their emotions. They thought they could convince themselves that what existed between you was ordinary. But now they know it wasn't. Now they understand. Now they see what they failed to see before. And that realization is changing everything. Think about this carefully. Why do certain memories refuse to fade? Why do certain faces remain unforgettable? Why do certain conversations echo inside the mind long after they have ended? Because some connections leave fingerprints on the soul. And your presence left a mark. A mark this person cannot ignore. There is a moment approaching. A moment neither of you can fully predict. A moment that begins with a simple conversation. But it won't feel simple. Because beneath the words will be months of emotion. Months of silence. Months of questions. Months of longing. Everything that remained unspoken will suddenly begin looking for a voice. And when that happens, the energy between you will feel impossible to deny. What makes this even more surprising is that this person has been fighting these feelings. They have tried to stay busy. They have tried to focus elsewhere. They have tried to distract themselves. Yet every distraction eventually fails. Because the heart has a strange way of returning to what truly matters. And lately, that return has become impossible to stop. There are nights when they replay old conversations. Moments when they remember your laughter. Moments when they remember the comfort they felt around you. Moments when they realize they never found that same feeling anywhere else. That realization hurts. But it also awakens something. It awakens courage. The courage to stop pretending. The courage to stop hiding. The courage to finally speak. And that is why the emotional conversation coming toward you is different from anything you expect. This isn't about casual words. This isn't about small talk. This is about truth. Raw truth. Honest truth. The kind of truth people avoid because it makes them vulnerable. And vulnerability is frightening. But sometimes the fear of losing someone forever becomes greater than the fear of being honest. That is where this person is now. Standing between fear and truth. Standing between silence and confession. Standing between holding back and finally reaching out. The most fascinating part? They may not even realize how close they are to taking action. Because emotional decisions often build quietly. One thought becomes 10 thoughts. 10 thoughts become 100. And eventually the heart becomes louder than the excuses. The excuses begin collapsing. The walls begin weakening. The distance begins feeling unbearable. And suddenly a message appears. A call happens. A conversation begins. What seemed impossible suddenly becomes real. If you've been sensing unusual emotions lately, pay attention. If you've been thinking about someone unexpectedly, pay attention. If certain memories have been resurfacing, pay attention. Because sometimes emotional energy moves in both directions. Sometimes two people feel the same pull without realizing it. Sometimes two hearts are moving toward the same moment. And neither one knows the other feels it too. That is what makes these situations so powerful. For months, maybe even longer, both people can be carrying emotions. Both people can be remembering. Both people can be wondering. Yet neither speaks. Until one day something changes. One day the silence becomes too heavy. One day the emotions become too strong. One day the truth demands to be heard. And that day creates a turning point. A turning point that changes everything afterward. Imagine hearing the words you never expected to hear. Imagine discovering that the person you thought had forgotten you never actually did. Imagine learning that while you were questioning the connection, they were questioning it too. Imagine finding out that your absence affected them far more deeply than they ever admitted. Those revelations have the power to transform an entire story. Because the greatest surprises are rarely external. The greatest surprises happen inside the heart. They happen when hidden emotions finally come into the light. And right now, hidden emotions are rising. The memories are becoming impossible to suppress. The feelings are becoming impossible to deny. The truth is becoming impossible to avoid. This person misses your presence. They miss your energy. They miss the way you understood things others never understood. They miss the comfort. They miss the familiarity. They miss the connection. And perhaps most importantly, they miss who they were when you were around. That realization is one of the strongest emotional experiences a person can have. Because sometimes people don't just miss someone. They miss the version of themselves that existed within that connection. And once they recognize that, everything changes. The emotional conversation approaching isn't random. It is the result of every memory. Every feeling. Every regret. Every realization. Every sleepless night. Every unanswered question. Everything has been building toward this moment. Like a river slowly gathering strength before reaching the ocean. The current becomes stronger. The movement becomes inevitable. And eventually the destination arrives. So if life feels unusually quiet right now, don't mistake quietness for inactivity. Some of the biggest emotional shifts happen in silence first. Some of the most important conversations are born long before the first word is spoken. The heart begins speaking before the mouth ever does. And somewhere, right now, a heart is speaking. Speaking your name. Speaking your memory. Speaking your importance. Even if you cannot hear it yet. The truth is that not every connection survives. Not every story continues. But every meaningful connection leaves lessons. And every deep bond leaves traces. The traces surrounding this connection are stronger than ever. They are growing. They are intensifying. They are moving toward expression. Which means the chapter ahead may look very different from the chapter behind. A conversation is coming. Not because fate suddenly changed. Not because magic appeared. But because emotions can only stay hidden for so long. Eventually they surface. Eventually they speak. Eventually they reveal themselves. And when they do, the truth often turns out to be more powerful than anyone expected. So remember this. While you are living your life. While you are focusing on your future. While you are moving through your days. Someone is carrying memories they cannot release. Someone is carrying emotions they cannot explain. Someone is carrying words they have not yet spoken. But the silence is ending. The distance is weakening. The truth is approaching. And very soon, an emotional conversation may reveal just how deeply you have been missed. What if I told you that the story is not ending where you think it is? What if the silence you've been seeing is not a sign of indifference? What if the distance was never the real problem? Because there is something happening beneath the surface that very few people understand. When someone truly misses you, the process is rarely instant. At first, they distract themselves. They convince themselves they are fine. They tell themselves they have moved on. They repeat the same story over and over until they almost believe it. But then something unexpected happens. A song reminds them of you. A place reminds them of you. A certain phrase reminds them of you. A random moment during an ordinary day suddenly brings your memory rushing back. And in that instant, all the emotions they tried to bury begin rising again. That is exactly where this person is now. The walls they built around their heart are no longer holding. The memories are becoming stronger than the resistance. And the deeper they look inside themselves, the more they realize one shocking truth. They never truly stopped caring. They simply stopped talking about it. There is a difference. A huge difference. Many people mistake silence for absence. But silence does not always mean feelings disappeared. Sometimes silence means the feelings became too complicated to express. Sometimes silence means fear took control. Sometimes silence means someone is fighting a battle nobody else can see. And this person has been fighting that battle for longer than you realize. They have replayed moments between you countless times. Not once. Not twice. Countless times. Certain memories have become impossible for them to forget. They remember details they never expected to remember. The way you spoke. The way you reacted. The way you made them feel understood. The way your presence changed the atmosphere around them. These are not memories people carry when a connection means nothing. These are memories people carry when a connection touched something deep inside them. That is why the upcoming conversation feels different. Because this isn't a conversation built on impulse. This isn't a conversation built on temporary emotion. This is a conversation built on accumulated truth. Truth that has been growing stronger every single day. And the longer it grows, the harder it becomes to ignore. There is another revelation you need to hear. This person has recently started comparing everyone to you. Without even realizing it. They meet new people. They have new experiences. They continue living their life. But somehow something feels missing. Something feels incomplete. And eventually they begin asking themselves a question they were afraid to ask before. Why does nobody feel the same? Why does nobody create the same emotional connection? Why does nobody leave the same impact? Those questions are powerful. Because once a person starts asking them, the answers usually lead back to the same place. Back to you. Back to the connection. Back to the memories. Back to the unfinished emotions. That realization has created a shift inside them. A shift they cannot reverse. The interesting thing about emotional awakenings is that they often happen unexpectedly. One day everything feels normal. The next day a realization changes everything. And once that realization arrives, there is no going back to ignorance. You cannot unknow what your heart knows. You cannot unfeel what your soul recognizes. You cannot erase what has become emotionally significant. That is why this person is approaching a crossroads. A crossroads between continuing to remain silent and finally speaking their truth. And every day that passes is pushing them closer toward that decision. There are moments when they imagine reaching out. Moments when they picture the conversation. Moments when they wonder how you would respond. Moments when they ask themselves whether it's too late. Whether enough time has passed. Whether the opportunity still exists. These questions have been living inside their mind. Growing louder. Growing heavier. Growing more urgent. And eventually questions demand answers. Eventually uncertainty becomes unbearable. Eventually curiosity becomes stronger than fear. That is when action begins. There is something else you may not know. This person has regrets. Real regrets. Not the kind people casually mention. The kind that keep them awake. The kind that return during quiet moments. The kind that make them wish they had handled certain situations differently. Because hindsight has given them a perspective they didn't have before. Now they see things differently. Now they understand things differently. Now they appreciate things differently. And that change in perspective is creating powerful emotional momentum. The truth is that many people only understand the value of a connection after they experience life without it. When something is present every day, it can become familiar. And familiarity often hides importance. But absence reveals importance. Absence reveals value. Absence reveals meaning. And absence has revealed a great deal to this person. It has shown them what they lost. It has shown them what mattered. It has shown them what they can no longer pretend was insignificant. That realization is changing the direction of their thoughts. The future they once imagined no longer feels complete without addressing these emotions. The unfinished chapter keeps calling them back. The unanswered questions keep pulling them closer. The unspoken words keep demanding attention. And that is why the emotional conversation is becoming inevitable. Because eventually people reach a point where silence costs more than honesty. They reach a point where keeping everything inside becomes exhausting. They reach a point where truth feels like the only path forward. This person is approaching that point now. Closer than ever before. Every day their emotions are becoming clearer. Every day their understanding is becoming deeper. Every day their desire to reconnect is becoming stronger. And whether they realize it or not, their heart is preparing them for a conversation that could change everything. Imagine the moment. The message arrives. The conversation begins. At first, the words may seem ordinary. Simple greetings. Simple questions. Simple exchanges. But beneath those words will be something much deeper. Emotion. History. Memory. Longing. Regret. Hope. Everything hidden beneath the surface will be present. Because some conversations carry far more than words. Some conversations carry entire chapters of life. This is one of those conversations. And when it happens, you may finally understand something you've been wondering about for a long time. You may finally see what was happening behind the silence. You may finally understand what was hidden behind the distance. You may finally realize that while you thought the connection was fading, it was actually growing inside someone's heart. That realization can be shocking. Because the strongest emotions are often the least visible. People don't always reveal what matters most to them. People don't always express what affects them deeply. People don't always show how much they care. But eventually the truth finds a way out. Eventually the emotions find a voice. Eventually the heart refuses to remain silent. And that moment is approaching. Closer than yesterday. Closer than last week. Closer than ever before. So if you've been sensing a change in the energy around you, trust that feeling. If you've been feeling drawn toward old memories, pay attention. If you felt as though something important is about to happen, don't dismiss it. Because sometimes your intuition notices shifts before your mind understands them. And right now, something is shifting. The emotional distance is shrinking. The truth is rising. The silence is weakening. And a conversation that has been waiting in the shadows is preparing to step into the light. The next chapter is not about forgetting. The next chapter is not about running away. The next chapter is about revelation. About honesty. About emotions finally being expressed. And what happens next may be far more meaningful than either of you expected. Now imagine something that most people never stop to consider. What if the reason this connection has remained alive is because neither heart ever truly closed the door? What if, beneath all the time that has passed, beneath all the distractions, beneath all the unanswered questions, a part of both of you has still been carrying the same unfinished story? Because that is what makes certain connections so unforgettable. They refuse to become ordinary memories. They refuse to disappear quietly. Instead, they linger. They wait. They remain alive beneath the surface until the right moment arrives. And for this person, that moment is getting closer every single day. There is a reason your energy keeps appearing in their thoughts. There is a reason your memory keeps returning when they least expect it. There is a reason they find themselves wondering what you are doing, how you are feeling, and whether you still think about them too. These questions have become impossible to ignore. The more they try to move away from them, the stronger they become. The more they suppress them, the louder they become. The more they avoid them, the more persistent they become. And eventually persistence becomes a message. A message from the heart. A message that says, you cannot keep pretending this connection meant less than it did. You cannot keep pretending those feelings never existed. You cannot keep pretending everything is resolved when deep down you know it isn't. That realization has been growing inside them. Quietly. Powerfully. Relentlessly. There are moments when they look back and see things differently now. Moments they once overlooked suddenly feel important. Conversations they once forgot suddenly feel meaningful. Choices they once defended now make them pause. Because growth changes perspective. And perspective changes everything. What seemed small before now feels significant. What seemed ordinary before now feels precious. What seemed replaceable before now feels irreplaceable. This is one of the biggest emotional revelations a person can experience. Realizing the value of something after distance has shown them what life feels like without it. And that realization is transforming the way they see you. The truth is that they have imagined this conversation many times. More times than you would believe. They have imagined what they would say. They have imagined how they would explain themselves. They have imagined finally expressing what they kept hidden. Sometimes they rehearse the words in their mind. Sometimes they imagine different outcomes. Sometimes they wonder whether you would listen. Sometimes they wonder whether you would understand. But no matter how many scenarios they imagine, one thing remains the same. The desire to speak. The desire to reconnect. The desire to finally stop carrying everything alone. Because emotions become heavy when they remain trapped inside. Especially when those emotions involve someone unforgettable. And you have become unforgettable to them. Not because of perfection. Not because of fantasy. But because of impact. You left an impact. You changed something inside them. You became part of their emotional journey. And people never forget those who truly changed them. That is why the coming conversation carries so much weight. Because it is not just about communication. It is about closure for certain wounds. Answers for certain questions. Understanding for certain misunderstandings. And perhaps, the beginning of something neither of you expected. What makes this even more powerful is that this person has reached a point where they can no longer lie to themselves. For a long time, they tried. For a long time, they convinced themselves they were unaffected. For a long time, they pretended the connection belonged entirely in the past. But the heart kept disagreeing. The memories kept disagreeing. The emotions kept disagreeing. And now the truth is impossible to escape. They miss you. Deeply. More deeply than they ever admitted. More deeply than they ever showed. More deeply than anyone around them realizes. There have been nights when your memory appeared unexpectedly. There have been mornings when thoughts of you arrived before anything else. There have been moments when they wished they could simply hear your voice again. Not because they were lonely. Not because they had nothing else in life. But because certain people leave a space that nobody else can fill. And you became one of those people. That is why this story has continued. That is why the emotions remain alive. That is why the conversation keeps moving closer. And there is one final revelation that may surprise you. The conversation itself may not be the biggest moment. The biggest moment may be what happens afterward. Because sometimes one honest conversation changes everything. Sometimes one truthful exchange dissolves months of confusion. Sometimes one emotional confession reveals feelings that have existed for far longer than anyone realized. And suddenly two people who spent so much time wondering no longer have to wonder. Two people who spent so much time guessing no longer have to guess. Two people who spent so much time carrying silent emotions finally understand what was happening all along. That kind of clarity is powerful. That kind of honesty is rare. That kind of moment stays with people forever. So if you have been feeling that something significant is approaching, trust that feeling. If you have felt a strange emotional pull lately, trust that feeling. If memories have been resurfacing for reasons you cannot explain, trust that feeling. Because not every emotional shift is random. Not every memory appears without purpose. Not every connection fades away. Some connections return. Some emotions resurface. Some conversations arrive exactly when they are needed most. And right now, everything points toward a moment of truth. A moment where silence gives way to honesty. A moment where uncertainty gives way to clarity. A moment where hidden feelings finally find their voice. Your soulmate misses you more than you know. They have carried your memory through days, weeks, and months. They have fought emotions they could not fully explain. They have tried to move forward while part of their heart kept looking back. But now the distance between thought and action is shrinking. The gap between silence and communication is closing. The space between memory and reality is becoming smaller. And very soon, what has lived only inside the heart may finally be spoken aloud. When that happens, remember this. The strongest connections are not measured by how often two people talk. They are measured by how deeply they remain in each other's hearts even when they are apart. And somewhere, at this very moment, you remain deeply in someone's heart. The conversation is closer than it has ever been. The truth is closer than it has ever been. And the next chapter of this story is waiting to begin.